Okay, so we're back talking about Virginia Woolf and her piece A Room of One's Own. I think the easiest way to get into this piece and think about it is actually something really recently that people were discussing on my Facebook page. Um, I'm obviously a big Shakespeare nerd, and so I'm friends with a lot of Shakespeare people that are people, actors and directors and theater people who care about Shakespeare. And I get a lot of updates on Shakespeare. And one of the things that happened um, on sort of social media was somebody, I don't know who started it, but somebody put up a post where they were like, oh boy, going into, COVID lockdown and, we all got to stay in our homes. They were like, but this actually could be a great opportunity. You guys don't forget that Shakespeare wrote some of his greatest works of art during the plague in London in the 1600s. He wrote King Lear, or wrote sonnets or whatever. And so people, and this is true. This is actually true. There was a sort of plague that went through, and not the Black Plague, but there was illnesses that went through London, and lots of people died. Certainly, a lot more people died then than are going to die now because they didn't know what soap was. Um, so they a lot of so Shakespeare was able to write these kind of great works of art, and so everybody's scared and everybody's upset about this whole situation in America and the world where everyone has to lock down because of this terrible illness or whatever, and it's sort of like a plague in Shakespeare's day where you're not allowed to leave the house, and then people so people are looking for cheery stuff, something happy. What nice thing are you going to say? Because you get a lot of, I don't know if you guys are on social media, but you get so much every day you wake up and it's just like this nightmare report about all the things that are going wrong in the world. So this guy, a Shakespeare fan, put up a thing and he was like, hey guys, this doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing. Don't forget, Shakespeare wrote some of his greatest plays during the plague. And the idea there being, I think, to inspire people who listen, if you're trapped at home, this could be a great chance for you to do something amazing with your world. And there's other people, by the way, who discovered famous things because they had all this free time during the plague. And so, Isaac Newton came up with calculus, or I don't fucking know. But Shakespeare wrote these great plays, right? And that maybe now that you're stuck at home, could write a great play like Shakespeare did. This is your opportunity. There's a lot of things. I understand why this exists. I understand why they did it like this. Why a person would say this online, because they're trying to think of something positive in this terrible, dark time. What's a positive thing about staying home? Well, maybe you could get a book written. Maybe you could create something of genius. It's a very sweet idea. Um, I totally get it. But there's some things about it I don't like when you think about it. Um, Number one, the idea that like you're supposed to be productive right now. One of the things that happens in America is everybody is expected to be producing something all the time. You're supposed to make something all the time, or you're lazy. Um, and so people go, oh, what are you working on? What are you doing? What are you creating? And even your teachers, right? They want you to write essays for school. I really feel like school should be you show up and we talk about things and then you go home. But the school wants you to be productive, so you got to write papers and turn them in, and they give you grades based on how your productivity is going. And I just think people should be able to hang out and think. I read a lot of Shakespeare, and people go, "Oh, are you writing an essay on that?" And I say, "No." And they go, "Oh, are you teaching that this semester?" And I go, "No, I just want to know what's in that book." And they're like, "Are you gonna give a speech about it?" And I'm like, "No, I just want to know what's in the book. I'm not producing anything. I'm just thinking. I'm just thinking." Um, anyway, point number one is don't let people bother you about how you're supposed to be being very productive, and you could get a lot of things done while you're stuck at home, because that's just fucking exhausting. Take a break. Sleep a lot. Just relax if you can. You probably are busy with all kinds of problems and all kinds of putting fires out, etc. But the point is don't let people make you feel, oh, we don't feel like you have to produce something at the end of this plague to make it all worth it, right? I mean, and you just staying alive is great. Taking care of loved ones and whatever. You don't have to make something. The larger problem with the quote about Shakespeare, though, when they said Shakespeare wrote his greatest plays during the plague, it's supposed to be inspirational. It's supposed to be like Shakespeare wrote his greatest plays during the plague, and now that you're stuck at home during a plague, you could write a play too. Isn't that a nice thing to think about? And it is. The first time I saw it, I was like, oh, that's a good point. I wonder what kind of thing I'm going to get done while I'm here during the plague. And then a lot of women on my Facebook feed got on and they were like, hey, guy who wrote that original Twitter, fuck you. Because they are at home with taking care of small children. Um, And one of the things that is hidden when you say something like, hey, Shakespeare wrote his great works during a plague, you're in a plague, you could write those great works too. Well, Shakespeare didn't have tiny children to care for. Because Shakespeare wasn't expected to do those kinds of duties. Just like in Virginia Woolf's story, Shakespeare was allowed to go to school. He was, because young men were sent to school, but young women were not. And then he was allowed to go to school when his sister, again, it's an imaginary story, but his sister wouldn't have been. And also, when Shakespeare got to London and wanted to, he wanted to get to know people. He wrote such great people in his plays. He knew a lot of people, so he went around to bars and hung out with people and was on the street meeting tons of people and having adventures. And his sister wouldn't be able to do that because she'd be sexually assaulted. And women weren't allowed in a lot of these places that men are allowed. She can't just go to a bar and hang out with guys in 1600. That's not how the society is structured. And so the idea behind Virginia Woolf's thing is that, sorry, let me check the time. The idea behind Virginia Woolf's story is who has the time and the energy and the free time, right? In order to be a great writer, you really need time to yourself. Because again, we talked about this Harold Bloom. In order to be a great writer, you have to be a great reader, which means you're going to need some free time to read a lot of things, and free time to think about a lot of things, and then free time to write down your ideas and find a publisher and work on the manuscript and do research and a lot of people don't have that free time. A lot of women don't have that time because they're expected to take care of children and they're expected to be housekeepers. And that's certainly, maybe more true in Virginia Woolf's day than in ours, but it's still kind of true in ours. A lot of the women in my life who, I know a lot of people who are, where it's a man and a woman, married and they have children, and the man has a job and the woman has a job, and they have children to take care of. And then they go on lockdown because of COVID. Well, what's happening in a lot of these families is that the men are like, well, I got to go to work. You watch the kids. And the woman's like, wait a minute, I also have to go to work online, because they both work online, right? And so, but a lot of the work culturally, because women are supposed to be, these kind of caregivers in the house or whatever, you get in a situation where even though the man and the woman both have work to do, the woman's work is considered less important than the man's, and she's expected to be the housekeeper and take care of the children while the man goes off to his computer and doesn't come downstairs for 8 hours. So this is a situation even in modern day America where women are expected to do all this stuff. Well, if women have to do that work, it's going to be awfully hard for them to find the energy and the time to do the reading and the writing and the research that it takes to be a great writer. And so Virginia Woolf, the thing that Bishop said was that women are that no woman in Shakespeare's day could have had Shakespeare's genius. And the way he said it, he meant that women are just not as smart as men, and so they can't write plays as good. And Virginia Woolf says, you know what? I agree that no woman in Shakespeare's day could have had Shakespeare's genius. But it's not because women are weaker. It's because women aren't given the opportunity. They're not given the opportunities and the freedom because you need a lot of time and a lot of space to yourself to be an author. And this is an uncomfortable thing to discuss in sort of modern day society. But who gets the time? Who gets the money? Who gets the freedom to be an author in the first place? And Virginia Woolf raises this issue thinking of all these women. And she suggests that when women have a great literary genius, it has to come out in different places, and that sometimes it can result in people going crazy or committing suicide or writing poetry anonymously, or right that this idea that that women have these gifts, and because you think it's healthy if you have a gift, you want to get your gift out on the page, but men have more opportunity, are given more opportunities by society. It's not because men have some special genetic power, or because their souls are bigger or different than women's, but because society gives men the space and isolation to do great writing, and it less often gives that kind of time and space and money to women. So, for example, I mean, we could do this all day, but just in terms of movies, men direct more movies than women. They're given more opportunities to direct movies. When women are given movies to direct, that does happen, but they're much lower budget. All right, so I'm going to end this video and we're going to pick this up because Virginia Woolf raises this issue for women, but actually it's a much bigger issue than just women. It's not only the question of who gets to make stories brings us into issues of race and class, which we'll talk about in the next and last video.